Welcome to day 4 of our scripture reading and daily encouragement. Today we're going to be covering Genesis chapters 8, 9, 10, and 11, as well as Matthew 5. So in Genesis 8, Noah's coming off the flood. He's been in the ark with his family for 10 and a half months. Now he's able to come out. And starting in verse 21, God makes a promise to Noah that he's never going to flood the earth again. But he says something that's pretty profound. He says, I'm never going to curse the ground again because of the human race, even though everything they think or imagine is bent toward evil from childhood. And I think that's the theme that we're going to see through the whole book of the Bible. And obviously we see it in our world today and in our lives today, is that from childhood, we do have this bent, as he says it. We have this desire, like this born-in desire to do evil. And I think that's why it's important that we have to be in the Word every day and encouraging each other, because it takes hard work to go against the evil nature that's inside us. He goes on and gives the rainbow as a promise. No coincidence that Satan would steal that promise, that picture of a rainbow, and turn it towards the LBGQT or whatever it is community. But it's really just a promise from God. And I want to encourage you guys, every time I see a rainbow in the sky, they're beautiful. And every time I see them, I just stop and say, God, thank you for your promise. Thank you for your promise of not destroying us that same way again, or whatever promise you've been looking to him for. Just stop when you see that rainbow and be reminded of his promise for you. As we go over into Matthew 5, this is a scripture it's hugely important. There's so much packed into Matthew 5. It's kind of hard to cover in a quick encouragement. But this is the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount. And if you've been to our church lately or been listening to any of our services online since May 9th, I've been processing through the Sermon on the Mount. And it took me from May 9th to about July 4th just to get through Matthew chapter 5. So if you want to go in more detail, please go on our app or our website and go to the sermon series that's called What Is It to Be Known by Jesus? What does it mean to be known by Jesus? And you can start on that very first one on May 9th and go all the way through July 4th just to get what's in Matthew chapter 5. I think this Sermon on the Mount is incredibly important because we do spend so much time evangelizing people in our world and trying to make sure that they make a decision to follow Christ. But later on in Matthew 7 coming up, Jesus is going to make the comment that some people will do things in his name, miracles, cast out demons, etc. But he'll say, get away from me because I don't know you. So I think going through Matthew chapters 5, 6, and 7 is just extremely important because we want to be known by Jesus. We want to meet, that day when we meet him, we want him to know who we are. Something I want to point out, and what I'm going to focus on today's encouragement in Matthew chapter 5, Jesus is talking about, he starts off with what we call the Beatitudes, or the things that say we're blessed. And I think it's cool to point out, I've said this in the sermons, but it's cool to point out really what Jesus is doing is Jesus is saying, if you want to be known by me, you're going to have to go against some of the things of the world. Some of the things the world calls good, I'm kind of the opposite. And you're going to have to get your arms around that. And I think it ties back into what God said in Genesis. In Genesis, we just covered, he said, these people are bent towards childhood to do evil. And I think Jesus is saying, so many years later when Jesus comes on the stage, and even 2,000 years later to where we are now, there's so much evil in the world and our actions are bent toward evil that we have to make conscious decisions to be different, to give up our selfishness. And that's really what Jesus is digging into on the Sermon on the Mount. But he says something that I think is really cool when he's going through the Beatitudes or the blessings. And he said, God blesses you when people mock you and persecute you and lie about you and say all sorts of evil things against you because you're my followers. Be happy about it. Be very glad, for a great reward awaits you in heaven. And remember, the ancient prophets were persecuted in the same way. We live in a world, and right now, I can't tell you how many times my own words are being twisted against me. Things I didn't say, or things I said that are just being twisted into something I didn't mean. And by the time they get back to me, people are hurt, people are mad. They're saying, all sorts of evil things. And we always want to be defensive, right? But Jesus says, be happy about it. Be very glad because you're going to get your reward in heaven. So that's my encouragement today. I just want to encourage you. If people are saying things against you, you don't have to be defensive. God knows your heart. We do have to work every day. It starts back in Genesis. Jesus is talking about it now. We do have to work very hard. This whole chapter 5 is teaching about being different, being salt and light. Where the law fits in. He's talking about anger. He's talking about adultery. If you even look at a woman with lust, that's adultery. He's talking about divorce. He's talking about revenge. Oh man, he's talking about loving your enemies. It takes hard work to do these things, he said, but your reward is in heaven. So my encouragement for you today is those people who are persecuting you, I'm kind of going to the end of chapter 5 now, pray for them. Love them. It doesn't say go hang out with them. It doesn't say be best friends with them, but it says love them, pray for them. To love is to be kind. To love is to not keep a record of wrong. So again, you're not letting that person necessarily run all over you, but don't just continue to dwell on it and create bitterness. Love them, forgive them, let it go, and know that you're being blessed if you're being persecuted. I hope that encourages you today. I think we're all being persecuted and talked about and lied about. So I hope that encourages you and helps you have a better day. Thank you.